The chandeliers at the Fairmont cast a warm gold over the table cards and glassware, and I told myself to breathe as the doors opened for my 36th birthday dinner. My name is Hannah Pierce, and by habit I've learned to stand a little to the side when my family walks into a room. The waitstaff floated by with soft steps my colleagues gathered near the back wall, and the skyline shimmered through tall windows like a promise I kept to myself. I noticed the empty place card next to my mother's left for my sister, who rarely arrived on time. The room smelled of butter and citrus of birthdays I didn't want to argue through. Laughter rose and broke like a wave when I greeted the ICU team, then fell quiet when my mother's heels clicked toward the head table. A familiar pressure settled behind my ribs, part memory, part expectation. Before the night was over, that pressure would become the line I refused to cross again. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. And if you've ever had to hold your ground when someone underestimated you, tap like and subscribe so we can keep sharing these stories together. I grew up across the lake in a small tan house where the front door stuck in winter, and the kitchen clock ran 5 minutes fast, a home full of lists on the fridge, and the smell of soup on Sundays. My grandmother, Ruth Bennett, taught me to press a hand to a fevered forehead and to keep a promise the way you keep the porch light on steady and without announcement. My parents valued appearances, not unkind at first. Just careful, the kind of careful that turns into ranking who shines and who supports the shine. By high school, Natalie had the lead in every page of our family album, while I had my name on the chore chart and a scholarship application folded in my backpack. I chose nursing because I liked the order of it and the honesty, the way a monitor will tell you the truth, no matter who is standing in the room, and I learned to solve problems without making a speech about it. Seattle polished the contrast in my life night shifts and scrubs on First Hill, then a mile away, glossy rooftops and private clubs where introductions carry the weight of tickets and gates. I rented a modest apartment with a narrow view of the Space Needle and kept a pair of good heels in the closet for the few nights I wasn't too tired to use them, and I learned that a quiet life is not the same as a small one. Grandma Ruth would meet me for coffee after my weekend shifts, her hands wrapped around a paper cup, her stories soft as worn flannel. And that's where I learned the difference between money and meaning. She reminded me that kindness isn't a costume you put on for a room, and that humility doesn't mean erasing yourself. When she moved into hospice, I took my charting breaks in the hallway and read her the newspaper, and she would nod along, pleased by the weather report and disappointed by the headlines. Those months made the sky feel closer, not smaller, and left me with a steadiness I carried back to the ICU. I didn't talk about that steadiness at home because someone always redirected the conversation toward Natalie's pace and wardrobe and wins, and because it's hard to explain the quiet pride of getting a patient off a ventilator to people who measure success in square footage and guest lists. By 36, I had learned not to compete for the same stage. I picked a room with my name on the reservation and paid for the linen napkins without asking for approval. The guest list was part work family, part college friends, and part obligation, which is a diplomatic way to say parents who insist on being seated near the microphone. Dr. Elena Morales hugged me and whispered that she was on my side no matter what, and Tara tucked a gift under my chair and promised to pull the fire alarm if anyone tried to give a speech that wasn't mine. The air carried that party kind of brightness, the easy chatter that only exists before the first wrong note sounds, and even then I wanted the evening to stay ordinary. I checked the time, traced the rim of my water glass, and told myself to be generous with grace and stingy with apologies, two habits that don't always live in the same sentence. When my mother arrived, she warmed the room with compliments that felt like steam on a mirror, the kind that fog up what's actually there. She kissed my cheek, adjusted the hem of my dress without asking, and told the table how proud she was of our Natalie, even though my sister hadn't walked in yet. My father shook Victor Lang's hand, surprised to see a name he recognized from a business magazine sitting with a nurse from the night shift. And I smiled without explaining anything at all. The servers poured sparkling water. The strings from the corner quartet slipped over the conversation, and the door opened again on the same hush I remember from school plays and award nights. Natalie stepped through, as if the evening had been waiting on her, one hand lifting an apology, the other already reaching for a talking point. She glanced at the head table, clocked the guest list, and smiled like someone who had brought more than a gift. Natalie's arrival was as expected, 40 minutes late and unapologetic. The conversation in the dining room softened as every head turned toward the doorway. She stood there in a tailored white suit, a shimmer of gold jewelry catching the chandelier light, her voice carrying before her steps did. "Sorry, everyone," she said, sliding her bag over one shoulder. "Client crisis. You know how it is when you're running a company." My mother rose like she'd been waiting all evening for that cue, reaching out for a hug that turned into a performance. "Sweetheart, tell everyone about your new contracts," she urged. The room shifted its attention like an audience waiting for the main act, and I knew then my birthday had quietly been reassigned. Natalie smiled, the kind that could light up a boardroom or a dinner party. 3 Fortune 500 clients this quarter alone, she announced. "Actually, I have a few slides I could show if no one minds." The music faltered as the server carrying champagne paused mid-step. I glanced toward my mother, already beaming. "Hannah, you don't mind, do you? It's not every day your sister shares such good news." Her tone left no space for refusal. Across the table, Dr. Morales gave me a small shake of her head, warning me to stay calm. I pressed my napkin flat on my lap, breathed through the knot forming in my chest, and said quietly, "Go ahead, Natalie." A waiter rolled in a small projector cart, and my sister connected her tablet to the screen near the head table. The logo appeared first. Heart Strategies, sleek and confident. "This quarter," Natalie began, "we've secured partnerships worth over $1 million. She clicked to another slide, numbers and charts flashing across the linen-draped walls. "Next quarter, we're on track to double that." The applause that followed was polite but hesitant. My colleagues clinked glasses out of courtesy, while my mother leaned in with a grin that could have cut glass. Unlike some people, she said, Natalie's never been afraid to dream big. Her eyes found mine soft enough for anyone else to miss the sting. I heard Dr. Morales shift in her seat beside me. "Actually," she said, her voice, "even Hannah just received an offer for chief nursing officer last month." My mother blinked, smile flickering. "Is that so?" "It's true," I said, keeping my tone mild. "I haven't decided yet." Well, Natalie laughed lightly. "What's that pay?" $70,000. Dr. Morales didn't hesitate. "More than double that." The air turned brittle, though Natalie recovered with practiced charm. "Still not exactly executive level, is it?" My mother's hand brushed my shoulder in a way that felt like dismissal more than affection. "She's just teasing," she said sweetly. "You've always been our steady one, Hannah. Same apartment, same job, same everything. That's important, too." The word steady landed heavier than intended. It sounded like a synonym for stuck. I caught my reflection in the mirrored panel beside us. Same dark dress, same restrained smile, same role I'd played for years. "Speaking of your apartment," my mother continued, "Natalie offered to help you find something more affordable. Maybe in the suburbs." I looked down at my plate, hiding a quiet smile. My apartment overlooked the Space Needle, something I'd earned, not borrowed. "That's very generous," I said. "I'll think about it." "It's modest," Natalie added, "but perfect for someone on a nurse's salary. I could even give you a family discount on rent." Her tone was light, but the implication was sharp enough to draw blood. A few of my friends shifted in their seats. Tara pressed her lips together, her hand tightening around her wine glass. "That's kind of you," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "And if you're ever short-staffed, maybe I can help you with patient care protocols in exchange." The table chuckled quietly. Natalie didn't. She smiled, wider lips taut. "Actually, I was thinking you could help at my company data entry or something flexible. It'd give you extra income." I looked up at her, unsure whether she heard herself. "Data entry," I repeated. "Don't look at it as beneath you," she said, straight-faced. "Look at it as learning from success." My mother nodded approvingly, as if the matter had been settled. "Family helping family," she declared. "That's what this is all about." Dr. Morales murmured something under her breath that sounded like unbelievable. I caught her eye, a silent promise that I was fine. I'd been through worse storms. Still, each sentence felt like a quiet erasure of everything I had built without their notice. As Natalie scrolled through her presentation, my phone buzzed beside my plate. The screen lit up with a familiar notification, "Vanguard Portfolio Update, monthly summary available." I silenced it quickly, my pulse quickening. My laptop resting near my chair contained 10 years of financial planning and the record of a promise I'd kept for someone who never asked for proof. Natalie's voice carried through the room, confident and loud. "And next year, I plan to expand to California. Victor," she called out to the investor seated nearby, "I'd love your input on scaling strategy." He nodded politely but didn't respond. My mother turned to him, her hand lightly touching his sleeve. "Our Natalie's always had vision," she said proudly. "Hannah's more practical, she keeps the lights on." A ripple of laughter moved through the table. It wasn't cruel, but it landed somewhere tender, the kind of small hurt that accumulates over years until it becomes habit. My friend Tara leaned in. "Why do you let them talk to you like that?" she whispered. I smiled faintly. "Because sometimes silence says more." But that silence cracked when Natalie's screen froze and she sighed. "Hannah, can I borrow your laptop for a minute? Mine's in the car." "Natalie, maybe later." "It'll just take a second. Victor, you'll want to see these projections." Before I could stop her, my mother was already waving for the waiter to fetch my bag. "Here, sweetheart," she said, handing it over. "Your sister's presentation is important." The next moment felt slow, like water thickening around movement. Natalie opened my laptop and began typing, her hands moving confidently across my keyboard. Dr. Morales caught my expression and mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded once, even as the pit in my stomach deepened. My entire digital life sat inside that machine. My savings, my correspondence with Caleb, the investment notes tied to Grandma Ruth's legacy. For 10 years, I had kept that world separate from the one sitting at this table. Natalie frowned at the screen, trying to access her files. My mother continued entertaining the guests, unaware that the evening had already started to tilt. "Hannah," she called over her shoulder, "you've always been so good with computers. Help your sister, will you?" "She's got it," I said quietly. "She's always got it." Natalie clicked again, impatience creeping into her voice. "Honestly, you should consider upgrading your system. It's a bit outdated." "It does what I need," I replied. She didn't hear me. She was already deep in the file explorer, her reflection flickering in the screen's glow. I glanced toward the window, the city lights blinking against the dark. Grandma Ruth's voice rose in memory, her favorite saying, the one she whispered near the end. "Patience, my dear. The universe keeps perfect records." That sentence had comforted me during long shifts and family gatherings alike, a reminder that truth has its own clock. At that moment, Natalie's eyes narrowed. "Just need to log in to my drive," she said. My phone buzzed again, the same notification from Vanguard flashing briefly before I silenced it a second time. Something inside me shifted, not panic, not anger, just a quiet knowing that the night wasn't done with me yet. My mother's voice floated back across the room, full of warmth that wasn't meant for me. "You see, Victor? Both my daughters turned out well. One's a visionary, the other dependable. It balances beautifully." I watched Natalie's fingers move closer to my email icon. She didn't notice the tremor that passed through my hand or the small breath I took, the kind you take before a door finally opens on its own. The room hummed again with conversation silverware against porcelain, the familiar rhythm of family hierarchy holding steady. But somewhere beneath the music and chatter, a current was changing direction. I could feel it like static under my skin. The night had begun as a celebration and turned into a performance, but the script was no longer hers alone. Outside, the rain started against the windows, soft at first, then steady. I caught Natalie's reflection in the glass, poised, certain unaware that she was seconds away from crossing into a truth that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about family loyalty and inheritance. And as the storm built over Seattle, I realized I wasn't going to stop it. Not this time. Natalie kept typing, her manicured nails clicking against the keyboard, like a metronome that only she could hear. Every few seconds she sighed in frustration and muttered about passwords and Wi-Fi. My mother hovered nearby, watching her as though she were performing some grand act of charity. The conversation at the other tables resumed, polite and cautious, but the air felt different now. I could feel eyes drifting our way, subtle glances filled with curiosity. My hand stayed still in my lap, even as I felt the familiar tightening at the base of my throat. The part of me that wanted to speak up was still outnumbered by the years of habit that said, "Stay quiet, let them have their moment." Dr. Morales leaned toward me. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded, though we both knew it wasn't true. Tara, sitting just behind her, caught my eye and shook her head gently as if to say, "Don't let her get away with this again." I managed a faint smile, the kind you give when you've run out of words that might make a difference. Then Natalie straightened her back, her face lit by the glow of the screen. "There we go," she said brightly. "Finally connected." Mom turned her voice carrying across the table. "See, Hannah, your sister just has the touch. She's always been the tech-savvy one." The comment stung in a small, familiar way, the kind that fades quickly but leaves a mark anyway. Natalie started explaining her marketing strategy to Victor, using my laptop to display graphs that belonged to her. I could tell she hadn't noticed the email tab open in the corner, the faint flash of new mail waiting to be seen. Victor nodded politely, though he glanced at me once, a quiet acknowledgement that he saw what was happening. My mother didn't notice. "This is what I'm talking about," she told the table. "Drive. Vision. Hannah. You could learn from that." I heard my name but didn't answer. I had learned long ago that arguing with her in public only made me look smaller. The music drifted from the corner soft piano, blending with rain outside, but I could feel the storm building all around me. Natalie clicked through her slides, her voice smooth and rehearsed. Then as she reached for her tablet, she frowned again. "Oh, shoot. I need to pull up one last file from my cloud drive." Her tone was light casual, but I saw her cursor hovering dangerously close to my personal folders. "Hannah, mind if I use your account for a second?" she asked. "It's already open." My heart gave a single hard thud. "Maybe after dinner," I said. "I can help you then. It'll take 2 minutes," she said, already clicking. "Victor, you'll love these numbers." Before I could respond, my mother placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't be difficult, sweetheart. It's family." I looked at her fingers resting there, her nails painted the same color as Natalie's, a small detail I hadn't noticed before. "It's fine," I said quietly, though it wasn't. Natalie laughed, the kind of laugh that belonged in a boardroom, not a birthday. "Honestly, Hannah, it's not like I'm going to find your patient charts." The room chuckled with her. I didn't. A notification blinked in the corner of the screen. "Vanguard Portfolio Update Account. Growth Summary Available." I reached to close the lid, but Natalie was faster. "What's this?" she asked, eyes narrowing at the email icon. "Hannah, you actually invest." She said it like I'd confessed to stealing office supplies. "Since when?" "That's not—" I began, but she had already clicked. The window opened for a split second, long enough for her to see the word portfolio, long enough for me to see her expression change. Her eyes flicked to mine, curious, then calculating. "Interesting," she murmured. "You should have told me you needed help managing money." My mother leaned in, sensing opportunity. "Exactly. Natalie could teach you a few things about finance, couldn't you, dear?" "Of course," Natalie said, closing the window with a satisfied smile. Though honestly, it's a little late to start. I stayed still, letting their conversation roll over me like static. They didn't know about the nights I'd spent studying investment courses between 12-hour shifts. They didn't know about the quiet meetings with Caleb Brooks, the financial advisor who had helped me turn Grandma Ruth's gift into something far greater. And they certainly didn't know about the clause Grandma had built into her will, the one that would later decide everything. I had kept all of it private, not because I wanted to hide, but because I wanted peace. Peace was something my family never seemed to value until it was gone. "Speaking of money," my mother said, suddenly breaking my thoughts, "do you need to borrow some? I noticed you've worn that dress before." She smiled, the kind that looked sweet to everyone else, but carried an edge only I could hear. Tara shifted beside me, exhaling sharply. "It's vintage," she muttered. But my mother wasn't listening. "You know Natalie might have shoes that would fit you," she went on. "Size 7, right?" 8, I said quietly. "Well, close enough." Natalie pretended to scroll through her presentation again. "Mom, I offered to let her move into my property in Bellevue last month. She said no." "Bellevue would be lovely for you, Hannah," my mother said, eyes bright. "It's safe, quiet, much more your speed." I pressed my napkin between my fingers. "It's an hour from the hospital," I said. So is your sister's office, and she manages." "That's different," I replied. "How?" she asked. I didn't answer. The silence stretched uncomfortable but familiar. Across the table, Victor shifted slightly, watching the exchange unfold. He didn't say a word, but his expression had changed. He was assessing, taking mental notes. Natalie noticed and smiled wider. "Victor, that's exactly why I say family needs leadership," she said, as if she were giving a presentation on stage. "Not everyone can thrive without guidance." I could feel my pulse in my ears. I took a sip of water to steady my voice. "Some of us do just fine, quietly," I said. "You just never noticed." For a moment, the table went still. The sound of rain filled the gap. My mother looked at me like she hadn't quite heard right. Natalie gave a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, come on," she said. "You're still renting, right? No savings, no investments, no—" She stopped herself, realizing what she was about to reveal. Her gaze darted toward my laptop again. She didn't know yet, not really, but she sensed something there, something she couldn't define. "Enough business talk," I said gently, trying to steer us back. "Let's just enjoy the dinner." But my mother was already frowning. "You should be grateful, Hannah," she said. "Your sister is trying to help." I looked across the table at Natalie, still smiling, still certain she owned the room. "I'm grateful," I said, "for everything that's about to happen." It was the first time that night I saw her hesitate, just slightly, like a dancer missing a beat. Dr. Morales touched my hand under the table. "You don't have to sit through this," she whispered. But I did. Something told me this night needed to play out exactly as it was unfolding. I thought of Grandma Ruth again, her steady breathing, her warm voice telling me the world reveals people at the moment they think no one's watching. That voice stayed with me as Natalie turned back to the laptop, opening another tab. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, echoing off the glass walls of the hotel. Inside, the air tightened electric and close. Natalie's hand froze over the keyboard for a moment, then started moving again. My mother's laughter floated somewhere behind her, brittle and bright like glass about to crack. Tara leaned forward slightly, whispering, "She's going to regret this." I didn't answer. I just watched my sister's reflection in the laptop screen, the faint outline of the person she thought I was fading with every click. When Natalie finally looked up, her expression had changed completely. "Hannah," she said softly, almost too calm. "What is this?" The email window she'd stumbled on had opened just far enough for her to read the numbers. Her voice caught on the word million. My mother turned confused and then followed her gaze to the screen. I could feel the shift, the quiet before lightning strikes. The storm outside pressed harder against the windows. The music in the corner faltered, and I heard my own heartbeat in its place. For the first time that evening, Natalie's voice wavered. You have $8 million. The room fell silent. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me. The rain kept falling steady and unbothered, as if the universe had been waiting for this exact moment. And in that silence, I understood what Grandma Ruth had meant when she said the universe keeps perfect records. It just waits for the right time to read them aloud. The silence after Natalie spoke was the kind that filled every corner of the room. Forks froze mid-air, chairs stopped creaking, even the music seemed to hesitate. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just watched as the truth rolled over 50 guests like a sudden wave. My sister's voice cracked as she repeated herself louder this time. $8 million. You have $8 million. Her words hit the chandeliered ceiling and came back down like shards of glass. My mother's hand flew to her chest, eyes wide-mouthed, trembling between disbelief and offense. "Hannah, tell me that's not true." I stood slowly, my napkin falling from my lap to the floor. "It's true," I said, my voice steady, almost calm. Natalie spun the laptop around so everyone could see. The number glowed on the screen. $8, 234 hours of 567, plain as daylight. Murmurs rose across the room, blending with the soft hiss of rain against the windows. "This has to be fake," my mother whispered, shaking her head. "Hannah, what is this? Some kind of joke?" I met her eyes and said quietly, "It's not a joke." Natalie's voice rose again, louder, sharper, breaking through the crowd's confusion. "You've been sitting on millions while letting us think you were barely getting by. You've been lying to us." "No," I said. I stayed quiet. There's a difference. But she didn't hear me or didn't want to. Unbelievable, she said, her laugh brittle. All this time, Mom and I tried to help you. I offered you housing, for heaven's sake. She turned toward the guests, gesturing wildly. She let us think she was struggling. She played the poor, humble nurse while hoarding money. Doctor? Morales stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. Maybe she stayed quiet because of moments like this. Stay out of this, Natalie snapped. This is family business. My mother rounded on me, eyes sharp. How could you hide something like that from us, from your own family? Her voice trembled, anger and hurt mixing like oil and water. We worried about you, she said. You let us worry. I never asked you to, I said softly. You assumed. My father, who had been silent until then, spoke up. Where did this money come from, Hannah? His voice was steady, measured. I worked, I said. I invested, and someone trusted me with something important. My mother's face hardened. Who would trust you with that kind of money? Before I could answer, Natalie cut in. Oh, come on. A nurse doesn't just make $8 million. What did you do? Hannah find some lonely patient to manipulate? Gasps rippled through the room. Dr. Morales' eyes flashed. That's enough, she said, but Natalie wasn't finished. Tell us the truth, she said. What are you hiding? I felt something inside me settle something that had been restless for years. You want the truth, I said, lifting my chin. Grandma Ruth left it to me. The name stopped my mother cold. For a moment she looked younger, smaller, her hand tightening around her wine glass. That's impossible, she whispered. Mother didn't have that kind of money. Appearances can be deceiving, I said. She invested for 50 years. She saved every penny she could, and she made her wishes clear. Natalie laughed, the sound brittle and hollow. Grandma lived in a house the size of a postage stamp and drove a 15-year-old car, because she didn't waste money proving anything I said. She lived quietly and left what she had to someone who cared for her. And that someone wasn't us. My mother said, her voice breaking. She was my mother. The room felt smaller now, the air heavy. I could still see the reflection of the rain streaking down the windows, the shimmer of lights bouncing off crystal glasses. She left it to the person who showed up, I said. Every day, every appointment, every hard conversation. She left it to the person who held her hand when no one else would. My mother took a step toward me. You turned her against us, she said. You poisoned her mind. I didn't have to, I said quietly. You did that yourselves. The crowd shifted, the whispers beginning again. Tara looked at me with tears in her eyes. Dr. Morales stood at my shoulder like a quiet guard. My mother was trembling now, her voice rising. You will not talk to me that way. I am your mother. Then act like one, I said. The words hung between us, impossible to pull back. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. Natalie's fury filled the silence. You know what, Hannah, she said, her voice low. If Grandma left you that money, we deserve a share. Family shares. She folded her arms, chin lifting defiantly. I want 25%. That's only fair after all the years I tried to help you. And I want half, my mother said quickly, her tone like a closing door. You wouldn't have anything if not for me. I raised you. A nervous laugh escaped me, not because it was funny, but because it was unreal. You're serious, completely, Natalie said. You can't expect us to stand here while you keep everything. It's not yours to keep or take, I said. It never was. She reached for her phone, muttering something about calling a lawyer. Fine, I said. Call whoever you need. I'll call mine. I took my own phone from the table and scrolled to a name I hadn't used in years. Allison Greer. My sister frowned. Who's that? You'll find out, I said, pressing the call button. When Allison answered, I kept my voice even. Allison, it's Hannah Pierce. I need you at the Fairmont right away. Bring Grandma Ruth's documents, all of them. Natalie's eyes widened. What documents? The ones that explain exactly what you just triggered, I said. The room filled with uneasy murmurs again. My mother looked from me to Natalie, confusion replacing anger. What is she talking about? I don't know, Natalie said. But this is ridiculous. She turned to Victor, who was quietly watching from his table. You're a businessman. Tell her she can't just cut her family out like this." Victor looked at her for a long moment before saying, "It depends on the documentation." That word documentation seemed to echo across the room. My mother's color drained. "Documentation," she repeated. What kind of documentation? I didn't answer. I just met her eyes and said, "The kind Grandma signed before she died." The room went still again. I could hear the rain harder now, steady against the glass, like a clock ticking towards something inevitable. Natalie's hands tightened around her phone knuckles white. "You're bluffing," she said. "You wouldn't dare." I turned toward the door. "You'll see for yourself." I could feel 50 sets of eyes on me, a mix of curiosity, discomfort, and judgment. Somewhere behind me, Tara whispered, "Hannah, what's happening?" "The truth," I said quietly. Finally. I looked back at my mother and sister, both frozen in disbelief, their certainty unraveling piece by piece. "Grandma didn't just leave money," I said. "She left instructions." The server stood motionless near the wall, unsure whether to continue serving dessert. My father rubbed his forehead and muttered something under his breath that no one caught. Dr. Morales moved closer. "You sure you want to do this here?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said. "Here is exactly where it needs to happen." My mother's voice trembled now. "What did your grandmother do?" I took a slow breath and looked around the room at the friends and colleagues who had watched the night spiral from awkward to unthinkable. She made sure the people who tried to take what wasn't theirs would lose everything the moment they tried. Natalie's phone slipped from her hand, clattering against the floor. She didn't pick it up. "You're lying," she said, her voice shaking. "We'll see," I replied. The clock above the bar ticked softly, the only sound between us. The rain outside grew heavier, the sky deepening into thunder. Somewhere in that distance, I could hear sirens, faint and fading. Inside, though, there was only silence, the kind that comes right before the air changes. I turned toward the doorway, waiting. Allison Greer would be here soon, and when she arrived, there would be no room left for denial. I reached for my glass, my hand steady again. "You wanted to talk about family," I said. "Let's finish that conversation properly." And as the lightning flickered across the windows, I knew this night wasn't about money anymore. It was about everything that had been buried with Grandma Ruth. Allison arrived 20 minutes later, the sound of her heels cutting through the soft hum of the dining room. She carried a leather portfolio under one arm and a look that left no question about her purpose. "Good evening," she said, scanning the room before her eyes found mine. "Hannah." Her voice carried enough weight to quiet what little conversation remained. "I assume this is about the Pierce estate matter." Natalie stood rigid beside the table, her face pale. "Who are you?" she demanded. Allison set her portfolio on the linen-covered table and replied evenly, "Margaret Chen couldn't come, so I came in her place. I've managed several of Grace Bennett's estate directives over the past decade." The mention of Grandma Ruth's name hung in the air. My mother took a slow breath. "What directives?" she asked, her voice small. Allison opened the folder, removing a bound document thick with signatures and official seals. "This," she said, "is the last will and testament of Grace Eleanor Bennett, executed in January of 2015 and notarized by the state of Washington." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the guests, now standing around us. "Would you like me to read the relevant sections, or shall I summarize?" "Read them," I said quietly. "All of them." The sound of paper turning filled the silence. Grace Bennett leaves the entirety of her estate, valued at approximately $3 million in assets, securities, and property, to her granddaughter, Hannah Pierce. Natalie's voice broke through the stillness. $3 million. She had $3 million. Allison didn't look up. Yes. Hannah's financial management over the past decade has increased that amount substantially. My mother sank into her chair, her face drained of color. "There is," Allison continued, "a condition attached to this inheritance. Ms. Pierce was to keep its existence private for a period of 10 years. Additionally, any family member who abandoned Grace Bennett during her final illness forfeited any claim, present or future, to this estate." She lifted another page. "The hospice visitation logs confirm these details." Natalie's voice was barely above a whisper. "Abandoned," Allison read from the list, her tone factual, not cruel. "Hannah Pierce, 247 visits, Marianne Pierce, 3, Natalie Hart, none. Gasps rose from the tables behind us. My mother gripped the edge of the tablecloth like it might steady her. "We didn't abandon her," she said. "We were busy. Work travel responsibilities." Allison closed the folder softly. The documentation speaks for itself. The room fell quiet again. Only the rain tapping against the windows filled the space between us. Furthermore, Allison said, glancing down at one more sheet, Grace Bennett included what's called a forfeiture clause. Any family member who demands or attempts to claim a share of Hannah's inheritance immediately and permanently forfeits any possibility of future gifts or assistance from her. My mother's hand went to her chest. "That can't be legal." A voice came from the corner of the room, measured calm. "Actually, it can," said a man I hadn't noticed before. He stepped forward, introducing himself as Samuel Ortiz, a senior estate lawyer who had come as a guest of one of my colleagues. "Clauses like that have been upheld in Washington courts for decades." Allison nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Ortiz." She turned her attention back to my family. "By publicly demanding 25% and 50% of Ms. Pierce's inheritance, both of you have triggered the forfeiture clause." Natalie shook her head, eyes wide. "That's absurd. We didn't know about any clause." Allison's voice remained steady. "Ignorance of the terms doesn't void them." The color drained from my sister's face as Allison reached into her case again and produced 2 sealed envelopes. "Grace Bennett anticipated this exact situation," she said. "These letters were written for Marianne and Natalie Pierce to be delivered only if either of you attempted to claim Hannah's inheritance." My mother snatched her envelope with shaking hands, tore it open, and began reading. Natalie followed suit. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the soft crumple of paper. Then my mother's voice cracked. She knew she whispered. She knew we'd do this. Natalie looked up, tears streaking her makeup. "She called me selfish," she said, voice trembling. "She said she loved me but couldn't trust me with her legacy." I folded my hands in front of me. "She wasn't wrong," I said softly. "She trusted me because she saw who was there when it mattered." My mother turned toward me, desperate now. "Hannah, we're family. We can fix this. You can share." "No," I said. "The time for sharing passed when you both decided presence wasn't worth your calendar space." A murmur ran through the room as Victor Lang stood up. "Ms. Hart," he said carefully, "about our pending contract." Natalie's eyes widened. "This has nothing to do with business. It has everything to do with it," he said, his voice firm. "Character matters." He nodded toward me before leaving the table, his assistant close behind. The other investors followed quietly, one by one, until only my colleagues and friends remained. My sister slumped back into her chair, staring down at the tablecloth like she didn't recognize it. My mother pressed her hands together. "Please, Hannah, you can't let it end like this." I took a slow breath. Grandma's wishes were clear. "And so are mine." Allison closed her folder and looked to me. "Would you like me to formalize the documentation of tonight's events?" I nodded. "Yes, every word." She opened her tablet and began typing. "For the record," she said, "on this date, September 20th, 2025, at approximately 8:47 p.m., Marianne and Natalie Pierce publicly demanded a share of Hannah Pierce's lawful inheritance, thereby triggering the forfeiture clause outlined in Grace Bennett's estate." Her voice was steady, each keystroke deliberate. When she finished, Allison turned the screen toward Samuel Ortiz. "Mr. Ortiz, will you serve as a secondary witness?" He adjusted his glasses and nodded. "I will." He added his digital signature before handing the tablet back. I looked at my mother and sister. "It's done," I said. Natalie pushed her chair back suddenly, tears streaking her face. "You ruined me," she said. "You planned this." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself. I wanted a birthday dinner. You turned it into an audit." My mother stood, her hands trembling. "You'll regret this," she said. "Family doesn't turn on family." "You did," I replied. "Years ago." Allison slipped her documents back into the case and looked to me. "You're legally protected now. Use your inheritance however you see fit." She hesitated before adding, "Your grandmother would be proud of how you handled this." As she left, the last of the guests began to drift out, whispering behind their hands. The servers cleared untouched plates, their eyes downcast. The room that had started the evening filled with laughter now felt hollow. I turned toward the window and watched the rain trail down in steady lines. Tara came up beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I will be," I said. Behind us, Natalie was arguing into her phone, her voice frantic. I could hear snippets, contracts canceled, clients pulling out damage control. My mother sat with her head in her hands, whispering words I couldn't hear. Dr. Morales approached, standing on my other side. "It's over," she said gently. "Not yet," I murmured. "They still have to live with the truth." Lightning flickered across the Seattle skyline, bright enough to reflect in the glass. In that flash, I saw the two women who had shaped most of my life, one driven by image, the other by envy, and realized that Grandma Ruth had seen them long before I ever did. She hadn't left me money to divide. She'd left me the means to draw a line they couldn't cross. The thunder rolled again, distant but steady. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash through me. The storm outside was just beginning, but the one inside this room had finally broken. When I opened my eyes, the last of the guests were gone. The waitstaff cleared the tables in silence. Natalie's phone buzzed again, another name flashing across the screen, another investor gone. She didn't pick up. My father stood by the door, quiet, unsure which side of the room to stand on. He caught my eye for a brief moment before looking away. "I'll take them home," he said softly. "Thank you," I replied. They gathered their things slowly, still dazed. My mother didn't look back as she left. Natalie did just once, her eyes full of disbelief. "This isn't over," she said. "It is," I answered. The door closed behind them, leaving only the faint scent of roses and rain. I turned off the lights one by one until the dining room was dark, except for the glow from the window. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass, steady, unbothered, alive. And for the first time in years, I felt the same. By morning, the video from the party was everywhere. Clips of my sister's outburst, my mother's demands, and Allison's calm explanation had made their way to social media before I even opened my eyes. My phone lit up with messages from coworkers, reporters, and people I hadn't heard from in years. "You're trending," Tara texted, followed by a dozen shocked emojis. I turned the phone face down and sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the city come alive outside my window. The rain had stopped, but everything still glistened like it had been washed clean. At the hospital, people whispered when I passed. Some offered quiet nods of respect. Others just looked curious. Dr. Morales found me in the hallway near the ICU and handed me a cup of coffee. "It's everywhere," she said. 3 million views in less than 12 hours. "You handled it with more composure than anyone I've ever seen." I managed a tired smile. "I just told the truth." She studied me for a moment. "You didn't just tell it, you lived it." Later that afternoon, I was called to the administrative wing. I half expected a reprimand about professionalism or online exposure, but when I stepped into Dr. Elaine Porter's office, she was smiling. "Sit down, Hannah," she said, sliding a tablet across her desk. I watched the footage. So did the board. I felt my stomach tighten, uncertain what was coming. "You managed a family implosion in front of 50 witnesses and still stayed calm," she said. "We think that kind of leadership belongs in this office." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. "We're promoting you to Chief Nursing Officer effective immediately." I couldn't find words. Dr. Porter laughed softly. "Take the weekend before you start. And one more thing, the hospital is establishing the Ruth Bennett Nursing Scholarship Fund in your grandmother's name. We'll match your initial contribution up to $500,000. I pressed a hand to my chest. "She would have loved that," I said. "Then make her proud." Dr. Porter replied, "Something tells me you already have." When I left her office, the hallway felt brighter somehow. Nurses I barely knew smiled and nodded as I passed. I called Caleb that evening, and his voice came through warm and steady. "You handled yourself perfectly," he said. "The market's reacting well, too. Our portfolio's up 12% this quarter. You've turned that $3 million into $8. I let out a slow breath. Grandma's plan worked. "She always had one," he said. "You were just the only one she trusted to see it through." The next few days blurred together emails from reporters, investors reaching out, former classmates offering congratulations. Meanwhile, the fallout for Natalie was brutal. Victor Lang pulled his contracts within 24 hours. 2 of her biggest clients followed. By midweek, her company's website had gone dark. Tara showed me an article headline over lunch: Seattle entrepreneur faces backlash after viral family confrontation. Natalie's photo was beneath it, smiling but hollow-eyed. My mother wasn't spared either. Her charity board quietly asked her to step back for reflection, and her social calendar cleared overnight. At first, she sent long, emotional messages about forgiveness and family, but when I didn't respond, the tone shifted to guilt and blame. "You're letting this destroy us," one text read. "Your sister is in pieces." I read it once and deleted it. The only message that stayed with me came from my father. It arrived late one night, simple and quiet. "Can we talk? Just the two of us?" We met the next evening at a small cafe near the hospital. He looked older than I remembered, his shoulders rounded, his hands clasped, like he didn't quite know where to begin. "I should have stopped them," he said. "I should have defended you years ago." I shook my head. "You don't have to apologize." "Yes, I do," he said firmly. "I watched your mother and sister belittle you for years and told myself it wasn't my fight. That was cowardice, Hannah. I'm sorry." We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he looked up and said, "I don't want your money. I just want my daughter back." The words hit harder than I expected. "You never lost me," I said. He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I can start being the kind of father you deserved." A week later, Natalie's company formally collapsed. Her employees resigned, her office lease went unpaid, and her name was trending again, this time under Marketing CEO Faces Professional Ruin after viral dinner. The same people who used to line up for her attention now kept their distance. I didn't gloat, but I didn't reach out either. Sometimes, distance is the only mercy left. My mother called repeatedly, leaving voicemails that started with tears and ended in bitterness. "You've turned your back on us," she said in one. "All because of money." She never mentioned Grandma Ruth, never the letters or the claws. It wasn't about those things anymore. It was about control she no longer had. Tara came by one night with takeout and a bottle of wine. "You know," she said, pouring a glass, "this is poetic. You've been underestimated your whole life, and now the world finally knows who you are." I smiled. "I never wanted fame. I just wanted peace." She nodded. "You earned it. And you set a boundary that half the people I know only dream about." Still, peace didn't come right away. For every message of support, there were others, strangers with opinions, people who saw only headlines. But the noise faded over time, replaced by something quieter and truer. A week after the promotion, I stood in front of the hospital's new scholarship plaque. It gleamed beneath the lobby lights. The Ruth Bennett Nursing Scholarship Fund, for those who serve with quiet strength. I ran my hand across the engraving, remembering Grandma's handwriting, her soft voice when she said the universe keeps perfect records. That same afternoon, Dr. Morales stopped by my office. "You know," she said, smiling, a few of us were talking, "you should teach a seminar, financial literacy for nurses. You've already built the roadmap." I laughed. "You think anyone wants advice from a viral headline?" "Exactly from that," she said. "They need to know it is possible to stand up for yourself and still come out whole." The idea stayed with me. Within a month, we launched Nurses Building Wealth, a small support group that met in the hospital auditorium after shifts. At first, it was just 5 of us sharing stories about debt, burnout, and the invisible pressure to stay small. By spring, it had grown into a regional network with hundreds of members. The media called it the quiet revolution of bedside power, though I just saw it as an extension of Grandma Ruth's legacy. As for Natalie, news traveled slowly but steadily. She had moved out of her downtown condo and was renting a modest apartment across town. Her social circle evaporated overnight. I learned through my father that she'd started volunteering at a nonprofit teaching small business owners about marketing. "She's trying," he said. "Maybe this will humble her." I didn't answer, but part of me hoped he was right. Months passed and the storm began to settle. My finances stabilized beyond anything I'd imagined, but more importantly, my peace returned. I started gardening on weekends, something Grandma used to love, and filled my apartment with yellow roses, the kind she always kept on her kitchen table. Every so often, I'd get a message from someone who'd watched the video and found courage to stand up to their own family or employer. One woman wrote, "You reminded me that boundaries aren't selfish, they're survival." I saved that message. It felt like the truest reflection of what Grandma had intended all along. When the first round of scholarship recipients was announced, the board asked me to speak. I stood at the podium, the light soft against the polished wood, and looked out at a room full of young nurses, eager and nervous. My grandmother believed that wealth wasn't about money, I told them. It was about how you use what you have to make life better for someone else. The applause that followed was quiet, but sincere. Afterward, Dr. Porter squeezed my shoulder. "You've built something bigger than any inheritance, Hannah," she said. "You've built legacy." That night, as I walked home through the city lights, I thought of Grandma Ruth again, the way she used to hum when she cooked, the way she looked at people, as if she could see through their excuses straight to their heart. I realized she hadn't just given me her savings. She had given me the strength to see who truly stood beside me when the world turned loud. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain on brick. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled over the sound, but this time it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like closure. And though the road ahead was still unfolding, I could feel the calm after everything that had broken open the moment before healing begins, when all that's left is truth, and the quiet comfort of knowing you finally stood your ground. 6 months after that night at the Fairmont, my life had settled into something quiet, solid, and new. The noise had faded, the headlines had shifted to someone else, and the only things that filled my days were steady routines and purpose. Mornings started early, coffee in hand, reviewing charts before the hospital stirred awake. Evenings belonged to the small nonprofit we'd built, Nurses Building Wealth, which had grown faster than any of us expected. By spring, we had volunteers in 4 states and partnerships with 2 healthcare universities. Dr. Morales and I spent our nights teaching budgeting workshops to nurses who'd spent their lives caring for others, but rarely themselves. The scholarship fund in Grandma Ruth's name had already helped 6 nurses return to school for advanced degrees. Each thank you letter felt like a small echo of her voice. The world that once ignored me now treated me differently. Emails from hospital administrators, invitations to speak at conferences, even an article in Forbes Health highlighting our program. I accepted them quietly, always careful not to lose the balance I had fought for. When the reporter asked what motivated me, I told her the truth. Legacy isn't about money, it's about what you build that outlasts you. My family remained distant. My father called every few weeks, small conversations about work and weather, always ending with, "I'm proud of you, Hannah." My mother never joined those calls. She sent one letter instead, a short note asking if we could meet when things calmed down. I folded it neatly and placed it in my desk drawer, not out of anger, but because I needed more time than her words allowed. Natalie, on the other hand, had disappeared from the spotlight completely. Her social media accounts were gone, her website closed, and her name no longer appeared on the local business pages. It was my father who told me she'd started working for a community nonprofit in Tacoma, a small startup helping women re-enter the workforce. "She's different," he said, humbled. I didn't know what to do with that information, so I did nothing. Then one Friday afternoon, as I was wrapping up a meeting with Dr. Porter, the receptionist buzzed in. "Hannah, there's someone here asking for you," she said. "She says it's important." When I stepped into the lobby, I froze. Natalie stood there holding a small manila folder, her posture unsure. Gone were the heels, the designer suit, the polished perfection. She looked ordinary tired, but softer somehow. "Hi," she said quietly. "I didn't know where else to find you." I nodded, motioning toward a nearby bench. "You found me." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. She turned the folder in her hands, then finally looked up. "I owe you an apology," she said, "for everything." Her voice caught, but she didn't look away. "I spent months blaming you for what happened. I told myself you ruined me. But I did that. I let pride ruin everything that mattered." The words hung between us. I didn't rush to fill the silence. She went on. "When Victor canceled our contracts, I panicked. I tried to rebuild, but nobody would work with me, so I started volunteering just to feel useful again. It's strange helping people with less than you humbles you faster than failure ever could." She smiled faintly. "I didn't come here for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see it now, the way you lived, the way Grandma raised you. I used to think you were small because you didn't chase the spotlight. Turns out you were building something bigger all along." I felt my throat tighten. "Natalie, I said, steadying my voice. Grandma didn't leave me her money because she loved me more. She left it to teach me how to use it. You could still build something, too. Her eyes filled with tears. That's the thing, she said, handing me the folder. I already started. I wanted to ask if you'd look at it, maybe even help. Inside were drafts of a grant proposal. The Compass program, a mentorship network for women restarting careers after business loss or bankruptcy. I flipped through the pages, recognizing pieces of her old drive, but shaped now by empathy instead of ego. This is good, I said. Really good. I learned from watching you, she said simply, and from falling. We sat in silence again, but it wasn't heavy like before. It felt like something shifting, cautious, but real. So she said, after a while, do you think the Bennett Foundation would consider funding us? I smiled. Send me a proper proposal, not handwritten drafts on notebook paper. She laughed softly, the first sound of ease I'd heard from her in years. We talked for over an hour. She told me about the people she'd met through the nonprofit, the single mothers, the laid-off workers, the women trying to rebuild after bankruptcy. Each story reminded me of Grandma Ruth's kitchen table, where no one left hungry or unheard. Before she left, Natalie hesitated near the door. Mom's been asking about you, she said. She's in therapy now. I think she's trying. I nodded. That's good. She wants to see you. Maybe I said, one step at a time. Natalie didn't push. I'll tell her you're doing well, she said. I'll tell her myself when I'm ready. She smiled, a little sad but grateful. Thank you, Hannah, for not throwing me out when you had every reason to. Grandma didn't raise me to throw people out, I said quietly. She raised me to know when to open the door again. That night, after she left, I sat in my apartment with the city lights flickering through the windows and opened her proposal again. The writing was rough, but the heart of it was sincere. I found myself jotting notes in the margins, thinking about possible donors, and realized something important had shifted, not just between us, but inside me, too. 2 weeks later, Natalie sent a revised version of the proposal, typed, organized, clear. I forwarded it to the board of the Bennett Foundation with a recommendation. The funding was approved within days. When I called to tell her, she cried. You didn't have to, she said. I know, I replied, but Grandma would have wanted me to. The day the grant check was delivered, Natalie drove up to Seattle with our father. I met them in the hospital courtyard beneath the same oak trees where Grandma used to sit when she visited for checkups. The air smelled like spring rain mixing with fresh grass. Natalie hugged me for the first time in years, her voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you. Just keep going, I said. That's thanks enough. Our father stood beside us, quiet, his eyes damp. She'd be proud of both of you, he said. I hope so, I answered. Later that evening, I received a text from Dr. Porter. Your talk at the conference was approved. National stage. Congratulations. I smiled at the screen, thinking how strange it was, the way everything had come full circle. 6 months ago, I was the quiet nurse no one noticed. Now people wanted to hear what I had to say. As I prepared my keynote speech that night, I wrote one final line at the end of my notes. You don't owe the world your silence to keep the peace. Sometimes dignity means standing alone until the noise fades. The next morning, as sunlight poured through the windows, I sent the speech draft to Dr. Morales and poured myself a cup of coffee. For the first time in years, the air in my apartment felt still and warm, not empty, just finally calm. Outside, the city was waking up again. The world had turned, the noise had passed, and what remained was simple truth, peace, and the quiet beginning of something like forgiveness. A full year passed before I realized how much life had changed. The noise that once surrounded me, family drama, public attention, endless messages, had faded into something soft and distant. I spent my days working in the ICU and my evenings mentoring nurses through the Ruth Bennett Scholarship Fund and the Nurses Building Wealth Program. What had begun as one painful confrontation had turned into something steady and lasting, a legacy of compassion and strength that felt entirely my own. Spring arrived quietly that year. The cherry trees outside my apartment were heavy with blossoms, and the air smelled like renewal. On a Saturday morning, I drove north to the cemetery, a bundle of yellow roses on the seat beside me. The wind was cool when I stepped out carrying the faint scent of rain. Grandma Ruth's headstone stood beneath an old oak tree polished by time and weather. I knelt and placed the roses at its base, brushing the leaves from her name. "You knew, didn't you?" I said softly. "You knew exactly how it would all unfold." My voice caught in the stillness, but I didn't look away. "You gave me everything I needed, just enough to stand tall when it mattered." I told her about the scholarship fund, the growing network of nurses who'd found their voice, and Natalie's new program in Tacoma. "She's doing good work now," I said. "Real work. I think you'd be proud." As I spoke, I noticed the small things around me, the hum of bees, the way sunlight flickered through the branches. It felt like she was there listening in her quiet way, reminding me that love doesn't end just because a chapter does. I stayed a while longer, then left one rose apart from the rest, a promise to keep building what she started. Later that week, I met my parents for lunch at a small cafe overlooking the bay. It was the first time all three of us had sat together since the night everything changed. My father smiled when I walked in. My mother hesitated before standing to hug me. It was awkward at first, small talk about work weather, the cherry blossoms, but there was no tension, just the weight of time passing. She finally said, "I've been seeing my therapist every week. I'm learning." Her voice was quiet, careful. "I can't undo the things I said, but I'm trying to understand why I said them." I nodded. "That's a good place to start." She looked down at her coffee. "You're stronger than I ever knew." "I had good teachers," I said, smiling faintly. "Grandma taught me most of it. The rest I learned the hard way. There was no need to rehash old wounds." The apology wasn't perfect, but it was real enough. Sometimes peace doesn't look like forgiveness. It looks like people finally willing to meet you where you are. Natalie joined us halfway through the meal. She'd cut her hair shorter and carried a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. "The Compass program's doing well," she said, beaming. "We just helped our first group of women find new jobs." I congratulated her, genuinely proud. Seeing her like that, steady, grounded, felt like another layer of healing. We didn't need to talk about the past anymore. The present was proof enough of how far we'd come. After lunch, my father asked if we could take a walk along the pier. The air was brisk, gulls calling overhead. As we reached the end, he turned to me. "Your grandmother would have loved this," he said. "All of it. What you've built. What you've become." I smiled, watching the waves roll against the pilings. "She loved simple things," I said. "She'd probably tell me not to forget to rest." He laughed softly. "Then listen to her." That evening back home, I sat by the window as the city lights flickered across the water. The portfolio Grandma left had grown beyond anything she could have imagined, but it wasn't the numbers that mattered. What mattered were the lives it touched: the nurses who went back to school, the families Natalie's program helped, the quiet ways people found dignity again. I thought about all the years I'd spent being underestimated, treated like the one who'd never quite measure up. It used to hurt, but now I saw it differently. Every dismissal, every insult, every quiet act of survival had shaped me into someone who didn't need validation to know her worth. Grandma Ruth hadn't left me wealth to flaunt. She'd left me the power to build something meaningful from it. The next morning, I woke to an email from a young nurse in Ohio. She wrote, "I watched your story last year. Because of you, I applied for a leadership position I never thought I could get. I got it. Thank you for showing what strength looks like." I read it twice, tears blurring the words. That simple message felt like the full circle Grandma must have envisioned. It wasn't just about standing up for myself, it was about showing others they could too. As the sun rose, golden light spilled across the apartment, touching the photo of Grandma Ruth that sat on my bookshelf. I whispered, "We did it." And for the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. Some stories don't end with revenge or applause, they end with balance, with truth, with the kind of quiet victory that doesn't need to be announced because it's already lived. That's what this journey gave me. If you've ever had to stand your ground against people who doubted you, I hope my story reminds you that dignity is its own kind of wealth. Thank you for listening, and if it spoke to you, share it with someone who needs a little strength today. Sometimes that's all it takes to start a new chapter.